Mm.
Oh. Sean, your mic isn't working.
He's muted. Yeah.
Welcome to the mute button, everybody. And welcome again to the Coach's Corner on a Friday night. We're happy to have everybody here. Please, check in and leave us some comments on the live stream there, and let us know you're here. And we're really happy to have our guests in tonight. First off, I'm joined by one of our regular coaches, is Grace Alanon, who's pulling up some production stuff for us as well. Alanon, how you doing tonight?
Outstanding. Thanks, Sean. This should be a lot of fun. We've got a really cool panel joining us this evening.
Right on. So the episode that we're doing tonight is Knights Under 30. And as it turns out, a couple of these guys managed to, have a couple of birthdays since they were knighted. But all of them were knighted under 30. And, the reality is that that is becoming more and more rare. People are finding the SCA later in life. And even for those that have been around for a while, there's some obstacles that they've had to face. And, as we were just discussing, we really couldn't do a panel on this, on Knights under 25 and actually get a bunch of Knights who are currently under 25. And it's just, it's a product of the way the society has grown. I say often that we are a victim of our own success in a lot of ways. But we're also, we're also competing against a variety of other things. What does the shirt say? Excellence is a habit. There's competing entertainment resources, if you will, and it's just things are very different from when Alanon and I were coming up and being knighted as well. So we're very happy to have a bunch of guys on with us tonight. I'm going to start with Sir Fedor, who's one of our knights from Kingdom of Artemisia right here. In fact, I knighted that guy. Super, super proud to say. And I have to say, I'm going to take my opportunity to say it now, because when we knighted him, I missed out on the opportunity to tell him that I was knighting somebody who was born after I was knighted. Missed that opportunity. So there's my little dig there, Fedor.
That's fair. That's fair.
And as far as I know, that's the only one that I've knighted that was younger than my belt. Fedor, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Hi, I'm Fedor, currently in Artemisia. I was knighted when I was 29. I'm 33 now. Second gen. Good times.
Right on. And you were originally from Antir?
So I was actually born in the Mid Realm and then moved to Antir when I was like 4 or so. Grew up doing the youth combat stuff, sat around while there was a transition period between rule books, and then didn't really get to jump back into things until I reached that pivotal point past freshman year in college and decided, well, academics, that's no big deal. I'd rather go fight.
Right on.
Yeah.
And also joining us tonight, we have His Grace Xerxes from Kingdom of Callantir. Xerxes.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. So I'm Xerxes. I'm from Callantir. I was also a second gen, born and raised in Callantir. Started fighting at 16, and I was knighted at 20. And I am 30 now, so I got to celebrate 10 years as a knight this year.
Right on. And then we have Sir Corsac from up in Avacal. Up, depending on where you're from.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, no, I'm up in Avacal here. Sir Corsac got knighted in 2017, so I was 27 at the time. And yeah, I guess I'm 31 now. So
cool. And finally, we have Sir Roland from West Kingdom. Roland.
Hey, I'm Roland from West Kingdom, Roland von Steinhaus. I was knighted when I was 29 and a half, so I just barely made the cut. I'm 33 now, so yeah, I mean, I've had nothing but good experiences, so I'm looking forward to tonight.
Right on. Well, since we got you on there, Roland, let's go ahead and start with you. Let me ask you, how did you get here? How did you find the society, and how did you want to start fighting?
So I actually didn't fight for the first like 3 or 4 years I was in the SCA. I had just finished with like other sports. I had washed out of baseball and boxing and MMA, and I was really kind of like struggling to find something to fill that void. And one of my friends asked me just on a whim one weekend. He doesn't drive, so he asked me, "Hey man, what are you doing this weekend?" And I was like, "I don't have any plans." And he was like, "You want to go to this thing with me? If you drive me, I'll pay for your ticket in." And I was like, "Okay." So he gave me some old garb that he had. It was like a spirit Halloween costume tunic, and I went and had a blast. Got pretty hammered, you know. Spent the next couple years sporadically going to, I think it was Beltane and October Crown, the ones that were like pretty close to where I live. I wasn't traveling a bunch. And I actually wasn't really interested in fighting at first, but my friend, he kept trying to push me like, "Hey man, you should really check it out. You should really check it out." And I was like, I don't know, man. And I distinctly remember that I went to Beltane and they had an open challenge. So all of the Dukes and the Counts lined up, and all of the other fighters got to challenge them. And the Dukes just kind of held the field. They all held the field and they just fought all day. And I remember watching Hansa fight and thinking, "Oh yeah, I need to do this. This needs to be a thing that I need to do for sure."
Nice. So let me ask you, you say you washed out of baseball, boxing, and MMA. Is that something you were trying to do professionally then?
I never aspired to be a pro baseball player. It got me through college, which was cool. After that, my dad was a professional boxer, so it was kind of the next step for me. But it was hard to budget the time versus the money. Like when I had the time to train, I didn't have the money to do it, and when I had the money to train, I definitely didn't have the time. So it was just like really frustrating. Then it started to get like later in life, and I was like 25, and then I found the SCA, and I think it was 2 or 3 years before I even started fighting. And I think that because combat sports was kind of something that I've been doing since I was a kid. So I kind of took to it like really well. Like a lot of guys, when they first start, the problem they have is they want to try to apply like Hollywood movie or like fight stuff to it. And that's not really how you do like boxing or MMA. You have to be able to adapt to what's happening. So I think that really helped with my growth. And from there, it was just, it was everybody's always been, whether it was Duke Hansa or Duke Christopher York, Duke Connor, all of these guys, all of them all wanted to see me succeed in with their support and with the positive reinforcement. I dove right in. I was going to, at the time, I think 3 practices a week. And when I got my knighthood offer, I thought I was in trouble because I was fighting in Crown. I was actually Duke Connor's captain of his Queen's Guard. And I had kind of shirked the responsibilities for the day because I was fighting. And I actually had a really good day. I went to the top 4, and he and Issa came over to our camp, and I thought, I was like, "Oh man, I haven't been helping them or doing anything all day." And then he actually called me over, and the first thing he did was he asked for my baldric back. He was like, "After today, I think I'm going to need to take your baldric back." So I started panicking and I started trying to make excuses, and he was like, No, shh, quiet. Let me finish.
The king is talking.
So I really like Connor. Connor's always been really kind to me. But I mean, almost all of the knights have been really, really kind to me when I was coming up. So I've had nothing but positive reinforcement.
Cool. All right, Corsac, how'd you find us? What got you here?
So I've like wanted to do medieval stuff ever since I was a kid. Growing up, like playing certain video games like Age of Empires and stuff like that. Wanting to really played a lot of that over the pandemic. But like, I don't know. I found the SCA when I was up in really far northern Canada, and I had a random friend from the mill that I was working in, a lumber mill, and he said, "Hey, you should come check out this weird medieval thing I found." And I showed up at this person's, I guess, longhouse cabin thing, and I was like, "What in the heck is going on?" He's like, "We got armor, and we'll put you in it." And he put a helmet on me and hit me in the head, and I was like, "Oh, I want to do this." Yeah, so that's kind of how I found it. And then I traveled around and I lived in a bunch of different places in Avocal and eventually settled here. So the questions are like how I got into it, and then
Yeah, that was pretty much what kind of what got you here. So
what got me all the way here? I mean, geez, there's a lot that got me here, but a lot of it had to do with friends, because this is the place where most of my friend group is. I just started to find cool people, and I didn't really want to leave. That's about as simple as it gets. Traveling all over the place and making sure that I could get to events. That's how I got knighted, traveling outside of Kingdom for sure.
Wow. Yeah. Cool. All right, Xerxes. I mean, you were born into it.
Yeah. No, my parents actually helped start a shire here in Callantyre when we were in college, and then shortly after they finished college, I was born up in Iowa. So was in the group in Iowa as a kid. Hated it as a kid. Hit about 13. Found out I could go do archery by myself, and that kind of kickstarted my interest in the SCA again. And then when I hit 16, I always thought I wanted to fight because my dad fought, and I always would go to practice with him and watch him fight. But when I was like 16, I was still kind of like half-time shooting archery because I was a pretty decent archer, and then half the time fighting. And then there's just something that took over. There's a passion that hit me, just the friend group that I had in Des Moines and the friends just in the Kingdom that just wanted to talk fighting and all the intricacies of it and all the cool things we could think of. And so my creativity just kind of blossomed into driving and an inspiration to get better. So just kind of ran with it. I wrestled for about 6 years before college. So that kind of translated pretty well, just coming in with a good base of athleticism and cardio and footwork. So it kind of translated pretty well. And yeah, I mean, I was only fighting for 4 years. I was in college, and so I had 2 years under me, went to college, and then through college, I'd hit an event whenever I could, but I've been around for so long just in regular life that kind of spilled over, I think. And, I think that's kind of where a little bit of skill happened to push me over the edge.
So
hey, Xerxes, I have a question for Xerxes.
Yeah, go ahead.
If I could jump in.
Yeah.
So I love the overall culture that exists in Callantyre, but it is kind of unique to the known world. Just, I mean, how army oriented and how melee oriented. I mean, oftentimes the path to peerage kind of runs through the army, but I've always thought of you as a individual prowess. Not that you can't. You fight extremely well as a melee fighter, and you're quite dangerous. But your individual prowess is the first thing I think of when I think of your fighting game. How did you get driven to individual prowess, kind of in the hotbed of we're all in this together?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, there are definitely there's two. I wouldn't say two paths, but there's definitely knights that we consider like. Yeah, he's a melee knight versus, he's a singles knight. There's our GOA, which we're all step-based, so AOA to GOA to knighthood. I know some kingdoms skip around a little bit, but our GOA is required before you get your knighthood, basically. It requires being part of the army, commanding the army, and knowing all that. And so even when I was 16 or 17, before I had a command of really my prowess, I was filling in holes and doing everything the army needed to. So that kind of built out where I felt I belonged in the melee. But really the competitiveness that I had drove me to the singles a lot more. And then figuring out the small details of a one-on-one fight that's really what got me going. Like I really enjoyed, okay, but what if we do this? What if I move him here? What if I move myself here instead? That kind of thing, just kind of picking and choosing the small things and what I can adapt around. And then can I beat him? I've always loved an underdog story. When I first started fighting, I was 125 pounds. I was maybe 5'8". And so I was like, okay, yeah, I'm the smallest person here. Absolutely. And so just going out there and being able to win against somebody who's twice my weight or whatever it happened to be when you're a 16-year-old kid, you're like,
twice.
Yeah. So, it was like, I love an underdog. I love being the underdog. Please count me out. I love that. That will drive me. no matter what. My competition and my competitiveness will just take off from there. So,
well, part of that culture that I think Ellen is alluding to, that kind of, one big household mentality of Palantir, part of that is, when you get done on the fighting field at Penzic, the whole kingdom marches back to camp. And so if you want to do pickups, you have to want to go back to the field after you've marched back with the kingdom.
It's actually frowned upon if you just stay.
Yeah.
Which is something I do. I mean, I am where I am. I go for pickups for sure after the meal.
I just get frowned on then.
Yeah. That's just where I'm at. When I was young, absolutely. I'm walking back. I go get my sandwich and my soup and my snack, and then I'm heading back out to hit the pickups.
The best fights we've ever had probably have been after the Baileys and the pickup field.
Yeah, and I push our younger guys as well. Like, hey, if you want to get better, it's after the melee. Like, those are the guys you need to fight because they're all hanging around. They ran their spear and they're just poking people all day, so they have plenty of energy for you. So go out and find those guys. But yeah, it's a fine line, especially in it. Palantir is interesting. You have to kind of play by the traditions a little bit and play by those rules if you want to still be seen as a part of the army. And you got to bleed purple, right? So you got to, for somebody who might come in from a different kingdom or something, it might be a tough one coming from a ideology from a different kingdom where there really is no melee tactics. It's just all singles, right? It's all about crown tournament. It's all about big tournaments, right? So it's different for sure. You got to play that part. So.
No, thank you.
Yep. Well, I know it seems to be changing as well. There seems to be more folks from Palantir who are willing to go out and do pickups. Yeah. I was at Gulf Wars probably 10 years ago when Chippendale got knighted. And I remember seeing a lot more Palantir out on the pickup field, out by the tree after the battles. Yeah. So that seems to be a thing that they're starting to pick up on. So.
Yeah, and honestly, Sean, you're probably one of the biggest catalysts for that. There was a couple of times you came out here, fighting with Sean of the Chippendales and Luther and all Ashir and all these guys, and you see them, explode from that because of the amount of teaching that you were able to give them that put the precedence on go out and do those pickups because you're never going to fight these guys any other time. Unless you go to Penzic, like you got to go to wars and you got to do pickups, or else you're not going to see what's out there.
Right.
And otherwise, you're going to live in a little bubble.
So. Yeah. Cool. All right, Fedor. I mean, you were born in this too, so tell us your origin story.
So my dad's a Pell, and my mom is Laurel. He mainly did kingdom structuring kind of stuff in the mid-realm, and she did a lot of illumination and some really early period fabric sourcing kind of things. I grew up doing youth combat when I could get away with it, but it was kind of frowned upon for the most part, coming from a pacifist background. And then I kind of rebelled when I got a chance to. So anytime I had an opportunity, I was down watching fighting at any chance. So it seemed like the natural progression.
Cool.
Yeah.
And since we're rolling back around to you here, so what, I mean, besides your parents kind of frowning on you during the fighting, what kind of external support did you have? What kind of, who was encouraging you to stick with this and see it through?
So there were a couple of households and a couple of select knights that really did a fine job of mentoring me at various stages of my development, if you will. Both in Antir as well as in Artemisia. And outside of the SCA, I kind of tailored everything to being productive and proactive for future SCA endeavors. Whether that paid off or not, yet to be seen, but that's okay. I can be a late bloomer.
Yeah. I mean, I tell a lot of people, and I guess this is part of why we're seeing it, an older demographic now is, I mean, I tell people, if you take care of your mundane life early on, then it's going to give you the resources that you need to do this game later on. But I mean, shit, a lot of us back, in our 20s, I mean, you get a disposable job, and you hear stories all the time of people quitting a job so they can go to Australia, and I tell people not to do that. That's
it's actually pretty interesting. I remember all those stories growing up. Like, I quit my job to go to Australia or Pennsic or whatever. And I went, I don't like that idea. I'll just get a job where I get weekends off and plenty of PTO.
Yeah.
So I think it kind of formed the second geners to go find what works a lot better. And I'm actually pretty surprised at how well a lot of the second gen folks that I know did academically, GPA before SEA kind of thing. And, I got through college in 4 years. I didn't mess around. I wanted out. I wanted to get a good job and then go start playing the game that I can afford to play now. It's on me, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. Roland, you look like you had some comments on that too.
No, I was saying I'm not second gen, but I'm checking all of the second gen boxes.
Yeah, and again, that's part of we're definitely in a different SCA now than certainly than when I was doing it. I mean, I remember when I was going to practice, you get done with practice, and then you go to the pizza place afterwards and hang out for hours and hours, and I'm like, God damn, how did we do that? Like, how did our parents do that? Because I'm second gen as well, and like how did we go out, have fighter practice and then go to food after, food and beer and all that, and then go home and get up and go to work the next morning, like, because I can't do it. I get done with practice and I'm pretty much ready to go home.
An observation, perhaps one of the, because it seems to be a trend among our panel, not all young people in their early 20s, late teens, early 20s, have it together. And perhaps it's the fact that, you have some goals and you were driven, and, you had a real thought about, I want to get my real life in order so I can play the game, kind of a thought. Maybe that actually is one of the things that helped you stand out to the Order of the Chivalry and the Crowns in your respective kingdom, to say, hey, these guys are a little outside the norm. And there's a maturity level, because we've talked about this in the past, that it appears that all the peerage groups throughout the SCA are all looking at people, and they're looking for a maturity level that's certainly different than they were 30, 40 years ago. They're looking for a maturity level, I think this happens because they're looking for something closer to themselves. So when they see your responsibility and your commitment to the, to real world endeavors, that helps influence their decisions to take a chance on a younger fighter or a younger, peer candidate. Just a thought.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it is true, but I thought of something similar. There was a point I could kind of tell when the Knights stopped worrying about whether or not I was going to quit the SCA. Right? Like, I had gotten a good enough job and I had clearly been around for a long time. And then they're like, okay, we're not going to waste a knighthood on you. And I think that's a holdover from when we were part of Antir. I'm not kidding when I say it's a waste, because they always had to fight.
Oh no, people.
So
the
hard.
orders take things serious sometimes that are weird that they take serious.
Oh,
but
sure.
That's one of them. They don't want to feel like they threw one away.
Right. But also compounded by the fact that they always had to go down all the way to Antir, and not a lot of knights from Antir were ever going to come up and take a look at these squires that they're fighting. Right. We always had to go down there, and it was always a huge fight in order to get your guy noticed. And so even after we became a kingdom, right, that's still going to be a feeling that people have, and they don't want to waste their effort and time on, well, why would I knight that guy? He's going to just quit in 2 years. Right. So, yep.
Yeah, and I mean that's a thing that is been around for a long time, and this idea that somebody's just here just long enough to get the thing and then go away. I mean, I think the reality is that you see that in a lot of martial arts, right? You see people who get a black belt in an Eastern discipline, like, you know, karate or taekwondo or whatever. They get a black belt, and that's enough for them, and then they just go away. But
Yeah, that was the goal.
yeah, right. And that was the goal. They wanted it. I mean, just because you got a black belt doesn't mean you are a black belt.
Right.
Right. And I think by and large, because we require more than just the martial prowess, I think we have a different level of buy-in that people have kind of committed to, that is beyond just the martial prowess. And we certainly have lost our fair share of people who got knighted, and then, you know, that was enough for them and they just went away. But I think for the most part, we have a better retention after our black belt, after knighthood. I think we have a system that kind of encourages people to hang around for a while after that. But there's always that concern. And, you know, I mean, once you know, because knighthood is a, you know, it's this benchmark event. And as an unbelted fighter, it's always this clear, that is the direction, that is the benchmark, that is the thing. And then you get that, and then knighthood could be whatever you make of it after that. And, you know, and so you get the belt, and now you're looking around like, okay, it can be anything I want. So what I want it to be. And it's just because you don't have that single-minded focus on the you know, the one thing that you can go after. And I think, you know, and so yeah, that there is a bit of that, you know, with, you know, are we just gonna knight this guy and is he just gonna go away?
We actually had that comment in the chat beforehand too about, you know, you guys are getting crowns kind of thing. Like after I got knighted, that was my next goal, right? Let's win some crowns. Now, obviously, I got knighted at 20, and I set a goal for myself: get out of college, get a job that can pay for that ability, right? And so once I did that and I thought I was good, I went out and I performed. It took me a couple and got one, and then I waited again. And I waited, you know, a good amount of time, 3 years, and then fought again and did it again. So I went, now I sit in a place where I go, what's my next goal? You know, you got to kind of set goals for yourself, because, I mean, you could say my goal is to just be a good knight always and forever, but that should already, you know, for me, that's the background. That should already be the case. I want to see what else is there to push me in. So now that I'm a duke, it's like I look at my squires at this point and I go, what can I do for them? Can I teach them to a point and make them good knights or good masters at arms? Mm-hmm. Or can I just make them good fighters? Can I make them good people? You know, what can I do for people other than myself? So there's always a goal out there. You just gotta convince yourself that that's your goal. So
Xerxes, being knighted at 20, did you have that? Did you ever have that moment where you're like, I've got my whole life ahead of me? I've got time, right? Like, I don't have to do it all right now. I've got, you know, it's like,
yeah, I think it took a lot off me. And I mean, I was fighting crowns from 18 to 20. So, you know, I always thought it was funny. I fought my first crown because I just turned 18. And somebody's like, oh, you got your Huskarl, which is our GOA. You got your Huskarl, now you want to fight in crown. I was like, no, man, I turned 18. It's legal. Like, I can do it now. So I've always loved that competition, and it was always a goal. And when I got knighted, I knew, okay, I've made a step. You know, my whole world kind of changes colors. So I get to look at it a little bit different. The first 5 years, I feel like I didn't feel different than I was before I got knighted. I still wanted to be myself, and I feel like I held myself at a very high standard to try and live up to expectations that were set on me for being knighted that young. To be honest, it wasn't very much fun. But it was after I became a duke and I realized if I'm not having a good time, then the people around me probably aren't having a good time either. So I had to kind of change my mindset, and there were some of my friends came through for me at that point, and, you know, whether it's a bar on wheels or not, you know, made it fun for me again to go out and make the SCA fun for not just myself, but give myself a reason to be here and everybody else that's around. So,
wow. Well, hey, I'm gonna bring up something that Al-Anon had brought up. You know, now that you guys have sat in circle, for a bit. Al-Anon, what was your question on that? I think you phrased it better than I did, but it was a great conversation.
Thanks. Now I'm have to try to remember it. Let's see. I think the way I phrased it, or the way I was thinking of it, is that now that you've sat in circle and seen some of the other challenges that young candidates have, do you see things differently, or are you trying to figure out ways to help them? Do you still think? I guess I've kind of forgotten a little bit how I was saying it, but I mean, the gist of it is, I know once I got in and I started looking and I was like, oh, wow, it's really hard to get in. I mean, the discussions and the pollings and the various, different kingdoms have different ways to do it. But man, it's kind of actually hard to get in this, break into this club. And one of the things that I thought was like, well, what can I do to try to make it easier for younger people? Because if they're ready, they're ready. The age is just a thing, whether you're 55 and ready or you're, 18 and ready, age is just a thing. And so, ready is the important key there rather than the age thing. So I wonder, now that you've actually been in, do you see things any differently than before? And what's your approach, to assisting and helping candidates? And just jump in, whoever wants to go.
I
you jump
actually
on
have
that?
a big problem of being too hard, too critical on fighters. But somebody else can go for sure.
I'm not sure that I've had a whole lot of change. I mean, obviously, I got knighted right before COVID. I only had about a year, and then we've kind of been slowly coming out of it. So I've only sat in on a few sessions. But I at least in our kingdom, if we talk about somebody's age and potentially their immaturity, right? That's usually like what you're thinking about. You're not thinking about how they're fighting, because that has to be a given for them to even be brought up in conversation. But if we're thinking about their if their immaturity and stuff like that, I'm not sure that's something we've really had to focus on a whole lot. And I'm not sure that I've actually had to change when it comes to it, because I was already under the impression that, yeah, you should probably be of some level of maturity. You're about to represent the kingdom and their majesties and the people of your barony in a bigger way than maybe you thought. People should have a good understanding of that before they get knighted. So yeah, I don't know. It hasn't really changed all that much.
Oh, yeah. Roland?
No, I would say it hasn't really changed. It's drive is what it is. And it's one of the things that I tell guys when they ask me is, it's like, everybody wants to wear a white belt, but nobody wants to put the work in. Like,
Right.
it's if you put the work in, it will happen. I was putting in so much work, and a lot of people, one of the things that pisses me off is people always like to say, oh, well, you're a natural athlete, you're natural talented. And it pisses me off because I spent so many freaking hours hitting the Pell, so many hours getting beat up by Duke Christopher. And for you to just say that, that irks me. But a lot of it,
I'm on your side. The first Crown video I had, the top comment was, of course the young athletic guy won.
dude, I hate that.
Oh,
That bugs the crap out of me.
That's garbage.
It's not gonna get any better when you're the old athletic guy. It's still annoying as all get out. It's like you're diminishing the hours of work that I have chosen. I don't want to say I sacrificed. I chose to go to those practices. I chose to go to those events. I chose to think and stay up at night and worry about how I'm going to get better, and what are my next steps are down the prowess path. And so, yes, I agree with you, Roland. I've heard that, it comes so easily for you. You're so tall, you're so naturally quick, and it's like those things made it more fun for me and definitely drove me to work. But man, it really diminishes the 10,000 hours I got in this game,
I had done about a year and a half of Pell work before I was old enough to fight. And it was nothing but Pell work. And to me, it was, Pell work was never one of those things I had to do. It was one of those things I get to do. My first Pell was a tire hanging from the tree, and I was sitting there with an old pickaxe handle, right?
Yeah.
I was sitting there, back stretching my legs, and this car came in,
So, I mean, that was, I got to, and it was like, hey, look at me, I'm a knight. I get to go out there and, beating on my tire and shit. Right. And, for a year and a half before I set foot on the fighting field. And yeah, I got the same thing. It's like, oh, look at him. He's natural. It's like, I was not, I did not, I did not have a natural affinity towards athletics in general. I mean, all of the sports that I had done were just, street ball sports where the other kids were like, this is how you throw a baseball. This is how you throw a football, that sort of stuff. But, it's like, I was never really good at any of the team sports. And this is the one thing that I found that I was just absolutely passionate about. And Roland, to your point there, I mean, I've been saying for a long time that the single greatest determining factor in success in our sport is effort. The amount of work that you put into it. I had, years ago, I had one of our older statesmen, one of our older knights, who had made the comment that, well, if I had to get knighted now, I'd never make it because, there's too much required. And my answer to that was always that, while the standards have increased, so has the training methodology available. Right. And the same amount of effort that you put out in the late 70s to get knighted, if you were to put that same amount of effort into your sport in 2022, you're still going to get knighted. Yeah, it might take you a little bit longer because it does take longer to get knighted now. There were people. There's a bunch of people got knighted day one, right? Okay, there was one person knighted day one. But in the first 10 years of the society, people were getting knighted like after a year or two, and I don't think it should be decades, but it seems like 5 years is if you're putting in the work, it's going to take you about 5 years. And the truth is that's, I talked to Tristan about this recently. It's like, how long does it take somebody to get a black belt in Aikido? If they are going to practice, 3 nights a week and, they're doing the work. And, his answer was somewhere between 5 and 7 years to get a black belt. So yeah, if you put the work in, that's the results. And, there's a lot of people that they're coming to the society now, like I said, that, especially as they come to the society older, you have a family and you have a job and you don't have the unlimited time to be able to just, pick up and drive 4 hours to go to a fighter practice. Right. And people have to make choices about these things and they get derailed, and they, some life event comes along and it puts them off and they, either they can't fight or, as Al-Anon said, you make your choice. Right. And I like, to be clear, I am not one of these people that says you need to choose this over all those other life events.
Yeah.
That's never going to happen. That is never going to be a priority. But there are choices that we make every day. There are things that we're doing. If you're sitting around all day long playing Angry Birds and you're not doing Pell work, you've made a choice about right. What you're going to do. You made a choice about the work that you're putting in somewhere else. And I've talked to younger fighters who said, like, I can either put in all this work to do this martial art, or I can go level up on World of Warcraft. And
so I'll be interested to hear what our panel thinks about that, Sean. But you said something that really resonated with me. That if you're putting in the work, 5 years from joining the SCA to becoming a peer should not be unreasonable. Now, should that be an easy path? No, that's obviously some commitment, a significant commitment, and a lot of work. But that seems really doable. I think that's more doable than the average that we have in some places where I've seen where if you're putting in the work and you're doing everything, we might catch you in 10, could be 13 or 14. And I think the reason that I personally come to that perspective is, I've been very fortunate to be in the SCA for a long time. I have seen a lot of people get made peer. And in some regards, it's lost a little bit of its shiny glitter for me, because I've seen a lot of peers made and I've seen a lot of peers come in and I've seen some do great things and I've seen some just leave and I've seen a bunch of in between. And I am far more interested in your story after your peerage than I am your story before. And only vaguely interested in the story that was the day you got elevated. I know it's a big damn deal for people, but I'm really curious what you're going to do the rest of your life. That's the story that interests me.
Yeah, I mean, I've known this for a while. You spend so much time as an unbelted fighter, whether you're squired or whatever, you spend so much time, what seems like an eternity, worrying about whether or not you're going to be good enough. And then you get knighted, and now here I am 35 years later. And like the time that I spent as a squire, it was like just a fraction of that. But it's like, it seems like there's so much, like the weight of the world is on your shoulders while you're unbelted and you're trying to prove yourself and try to get there. And then you get there and and then eventually you're looking at, I've been a knight longer than I have not been a knight moment, and I know, Xerxes is well, not quite there.
No, yeah. I've been a knight for 10 years and I've only been fighting for 14 now. So yeah, almost half my life coming up here shortly. When I turn 32, I will have fought for half my life as opposed to not fought for half my life. So, yeah. But it makes me curious when you're talking about that among the rest of us. Did any of us feel like we were a good fighter when we got knighted?
That's a great question. Let's go around the panel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did actually. I didn't think that I was the best. I didn't think that I was like amazing. They need to knight me tomorrow. But when they, and I had like even a terrible crown day the day they had put me on vigil. I don't know, my brain wasn't in it. Yeah, they put me on vigil and there was no question as to whether or not I was ready. I don't know. My whole like belief that I was a good fighter came out of the fact that I had been fighting in a lot of very high level tournaments and I'd been doing pretty okay for a while. And I had a lot of people around who made sure to remind me that, I don't know, I made sure I didn't get a big head about it at least. So, but yeah, I thought I was a good fighter.
Xerxes?
I probably the same. I think I was good, not great. I think the best showing I had was probably semis or quarters and a crown. And then maybe top 8 in the Toys for Tots, which is our biggest tournament we have. But other than that, I don't think I was competing in 4 or more tournaments well enough at that point. I know I had pretty good chance against a lot of folks, but yeah, I don't think I was a great fighter at that point.
Well, you shouldn't have to be.
Yeah, should have to be good.
Yeah, just good enough.
Yeah. Roland?
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that I thought I was a good fighter. I knew I wasn't bad, but there's a lot of really good fighters in the West Kingdom. So it's like hard to gauge when you're going up against guys who they talk about, in legend, and they just walk onto the field, and it's hard to clear the mechanism and not be intimidated. So I knew I wasn't bad, but it's really hard to gauge how good you are because people fight hard in our crown. It's no joke. Like when you come to our crown, like that's like you don't get the, let's see how good this kid is. It's this kid needs to die now. So it's really hard to gauge. Like I said, I knew I wasn't bad, but like I wouldn't say that I thought I was good. I knew I was getting the better of a lot of people in practice. So, but I guess I would say, yeah, but at the time I got knighted, I really didn't know how deep the pool was where I was at until I started kind of traveling around and realizing that there's people in other kingdoms that like talk about Uther and they talk about Hansa and these guys that I was getting beat up by every other weekend, making me think I was bad when in reality other people were like, no, those guys are really, really, really good. So I feel like I was good, but again, you stacked up against legends. It's like fighting Hoist Gracie, man. Like you're gonna
not gonna win the quarterfinals of a Western Crown, so you're at least quarterfinals of Western Crown good.
That is true. I made it to semis on the day that they made the offer. So that at that point I would say at that point I did know that I was pretty good because it was pretty stacked crown and I think Havek ended up winning it. So when Havek enters crown, he's not entering crown to joke around. So.
Well, I'm Roland. I fought you probably about a year before you got offered, and I can tell you.
I know. I still owe you one for that. You wiped me out of that tournament. I still think about that to this day.
I did because I knew just enough about you that I wasn't going to dick around. It's like I'm taking care of business on this one. I'm not fucking around with this kid.
That was Duke Christopher's crown too. So that was extra sting because you put me out of his crown.
Yeah. Fedor, how good were you?
So I thought of myself as being mildly good, maybe the top 5 in my kingdom for unbelted fighters, but I had one series of passes after run to melees where I had one particular shot that I was throwing on somebody. I can't remember who. It was you. And at that moment, I was like, I've got it. And then I showed up to Crown, and it was a trash day too. So of course, Zach, you and me, same boat. What's up with that?
Yeah, it's kind of the perfect thing where you're like, it won't happen. It's no big deal, and you kind of forget about it. You're like, I'm not gonna put this on myself that I need to get knighted. You're like, look, I had a bad crown day. It's not gonna happen today. You relax, and then you get surprised. It's perfect.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, like I said, having Fedor living here and having knighted him. I'll give you a little background on my thought process on that. Something I kind of wanted to backtrack on is, when we're talking about, how we see younger candidates. I really had no idea how old Fedor was at any point, really, except maybe when we knighted him. And because I never saw him as young. I mean, honestly, what I saw was exactly what Roland was talking about. That work, the work that he's putting into it.
Fedor, were you bald with a big beard at 18?
So surprisingly, I had long hair. If you look through some of the Sport of Kings pictures, I think there's a final between Sven and Kjartan, and you can see me in the background hanging out with Frederick Blackmore. I've got long hair, actually, just like you, Alan. No beard at the time, though. I had to shave it. It was crazy.
I didn't know. Maybe you were one of those guys that, looked like they could have bought liquor in the liquor store when they were 16. So
Yeah.
no wonder Sean had no idea how old you were.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, I never saw him as young because I saw somebody that was just passionate about what we do and always wanted to learn more. There was about a year before I saw what I saw. We were at Estrella and he and I were able to shut down the fighting field at Estrella. And I'm feeding him to Uther and all these other guys that he's been dreaming of fighting for all these years. And I think that was kind of a pivotal moment, but there were things like, again, I never saw him as young. I just saw him as, there are things in his fight that I think he needs to fix. And I've been following him for a long time. Fedor was one of those guys that I always made sure to make time to fight because he was putting in that work. And Harvest War was one of those days. We got done with the melees, got done with the tourney. I'm like, all right, well, let's get our time because I'm gonna make sure to get time for this guy. And that's when I saw what I wanted to see. And it wasn't so much. It's not like he came out and just blew my doors off, but it was solid, and it was the best I'd seen him fight, and it was real, and that was the thing that I saw. It's for me, it's one of those, I'm gonna use a really bad analogy. It's like porn, it when you see it, right?
You could say art, actually. That expression was about art to begin with, so you could actually just say it's like art. I know it when I see it.
It's like art in porn. I know it when I see
when
it.
When I meet you in person, I'm going to call you Sir Porn.
I can live with that, I guess.
You know it when you see it, right? I mean, and it was it wasn't a thing where it's like he just cleaned house on me or anything, but I knew it when I saw it, and so I mean, and again, it wasn't the number of tournaments that he's won or anything like that. It's just like, this is real. Like, he didn't just have a good day. He just didn't, have a good set of passes with me. It's like, that was real. So that's what I saw from that perspective.
What about yourself, Sean? When in the early 80s and you were 16, did you think you were good?
I did. I was
16.
I was kicking ass. And there really wasn't any doubt about it. I mean, I grew up with Mark. Mark Van Newman, who's just stepped down. No, he's still
he's still going.
About to step down, right? I mean, he was squired to Trelawn, and I was squired to Brian, and I mean, we were everywhere, and it was at a time where I talked to Mark. I'm like, hey, what are you doing against against Brian, or what are you doing against Trelawn? Let me try some of that, and I'll tell him what I'm doing against Brian, and we're commiserating and collaborating with each other, and little squires trying to get one over on the old man. But yeah, so I mean, I was fighting with those guys all the time. I got, besides being squire to Brian, I had a heavy influence, with Brian and Trelawn reigning back to back. I had a heavy influence from Trelawn as well. So I mean, and I was, I mean, Xerxes and I think Fedor can probably relate best to this. When you get out there and when you're young and you're fighting, and your knight says, "Hey, go fight this guy," you just say, "Okay," and you go fight that guy. There's a lot of my success early on that I attribute to a bit of just ignorance, right? I didn't know that I was supposed to be afraid of these guys.
Yep.
And Brian's just throwing me at these, dukes and crowns, and as it turns out, the best fighters in the history of our sport. Who I had no idea at the time. He's like, go fight, go fight this person, go fight that person, and you just go and fight them, and
well, I think,
okay, whatever.
When we start talking about then, like, what do people who are younger than us now, when they're getting in, or maybe just new people in the SCA when they're getting fighting, having people that do that sort of thing, and then knights being the people that, oh, hey, I know you, I'm going to introduce you to this fighter that you've never met before, you're going to go fight that guy. And so, like, building your own network of, like, fighters that are because if you don't want to throw somebody completely to the wolves,
right,
you gotta like, if that person is like gunning for a crown or something like that, I'm not going to put them up against somebody who's 2 weeks into the SCA. I mean, maybe. What do I know?
I disagree. I actually did that to a squire of mine at Penzic. My newest squire that I came to Penzic, and he'd been squire to me all of like 3 weeks or something. And I brought him out to a pickup day, and I put him up against Zipster, and I put him up against
Shark Tank, baby. Throw him in the Shark Tank.
Go figure it out,
But you got to have somebody that'll do that, right? When you're just starting in the SCA, like, I don't know about you guys, but I had a crazy amount of peer fear for years. Like, I think I was, it might have been 4 years in or something like that before I was really comfortable talking to other peers. It was not comfortable for me at all. But having people that then, when I went to events far away, I could go and talk to and be like, hey, who should I fight? I don't know anybody here. I'm here to do pickups, but I also got the tournament and whatever's going on. That was invaluable to me. And then, I built my own network over time, but I had to have somebody to give me a hand doing that. It wasn't something I was
well, you seem pretty well settled with yourself by the time you came down to Spokane for that practice I was at.
Now I know everybody. But it started because Kaviger and Rogan introduced me to people at not Sport of Kings, but Ursulmus and stuff, right? We'd go down to different events and, hey, go fight that guy, go fight this person. Oh, I've seen you online, Arminius, back when he was still fighting, right? Or Misty, and you just, I know you from online. Can we fight? That sort of stuff was really, really helpful.
To piggyback on something Korzak just said, I think part of building your social network and being like a good advocate as well, and into your knighthood, is knowing who your target audience is and who the individual you're working with is, because you may come across a Xerxes who wants to be thrown into the deep end, or you may need somebody who needs a little help with building up some rapport, some skills, some confidence, everything else, and that goes double for social confidence. So, like, I know for me, one of the things that was kind of like whispered about, but I always kind of knew that held me back, was that I am not a very sociable person. I did not like socialize with a bunch of knights after we left the field, because I didn't feel like I belonged. I didn't feel like I had earned that at that point. So it may be that we need to do a little more to like build that rapport, that direction off the field as well.
Yeah, and I think your generation, younger peers, are the bridge between new people and older peers. Because I know that, I've personally met Xerxes and Fedor, and I've had no problems immediately just saying, hey, I like you guys a lot, but I realize that you might have squires or people that who are younger fighters who, and there's peer fear, and then it's that peer fear, I mean, I hate it that happens, but I need sometimes people like yourselves to bridge a gap between myself and much younger, newer people, because I also have a concern as a 50-something-year-old man. I don't wish to be creepy and just continually go reintroduce myself or throw myself at the new young 18 to 22, 3-year-old people who are just showing up to practice. I feel like I need a bridge. Now, I always have I'm willing to train you kind of a thing, but that not having a bridge or a good social bridge between still doesn't put the right necessarily it doesn't start the relationship well. Not the same way as if Xerxes was to walk up and go, hey, I got someone I'd like for you to meet.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. I was going to toss that same exact thing when Corsac was like, I had peer fear. It's like, but what if you had a peer your age that was hanging around, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Easy to talk to. And to your exact point, Elon, we are set up in a perfect place that when younger folks come into the SCA, if we are the first ones to walk up to them and say, hey, how's it going? What are you into? Cool. Let's hop in.
Not nearly as creepy as if Sean and I do it.
Right.
I think it also extends past this. So jumping back to something we were talking about earlier, one of the things that I feel like we can bring to Circle that maybe older generations can't is that we can help teach, other peers how to instruct or how to relate with younger generations, as well as helping to guide younger generations like here. These are the things that, the peers around me are looking for. This is how what you're doing now, which may seem, totally benign or whatever to you and me, is being interpreted by people who don't have the social context or, the script. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I know, Ellen and I both as, longtime trainers and training at a certain level, like we're always available, but, some of these younger fighters, some of the, newer fighters, not just younger fighters, but newer fighters, they don't know that we're available. They don't know how excited we are to work with new people. And, there's an intimidation factor there for sure. And I hear people tell me a lot that they don't approach me because they think they're not worth my time. I've been told that.
If they only knew that you're almost impossible to shut up.
Right. Drop a quarter in the slot and I'm going to start talking. I'm going to keep talking as long as you keep listening.
So one of the things that I found recently, we've had some like newer people come to practice, and I show up and I'm getting in my gear and stuff, and I kind of know them. I'll introduce myself and then say, hey, do you need a hand with anything? And if they tell me no, I don't press it. And that honestly has seemed to work very well. They get a lot more comfortable to the fact that I'm here and I'm just going to be at practice, and they can watch me interact with other people, and then they can talk to themselves about, well, okay, maybe they're not just gonna, overwhelm me with information or make me feel stupid or something else like that. And then one of the other things that I've done is I'll find somebody who's not a knight and, hey, go help that person with their bell work, because then empowering them to do that sort of thing, that person, whoever I asked, like, they're gonna feel really important. And that is a thing that I found I needed in the SCA quite a lot. And I can't imagine that would be a bad thing at any point in time for us to just finding somebody else to also teach, even though it's not a knight, it's not somebody who's like got it mastered. Well, that's fine. We don't need them to master it. We need them to go make sure the new person feels really welcome. So
yeah, and you're empowering them to have an opportunity to teach as well. Yeah. No, totally. Brilliant.
Right on. Well, I'm gonna bring up a comment here that Duke Ronald out of the East Kingdom, currently the East, has posted this up here. Said if this show was done 40 years ago, it would have been getting knighted over 30 with the small number of fighters that got knighted that old.
Right.
Man, this is a true story. I remember. Eleanor, do you remember seeing the old farts tourney?
I didn't actually see it, but I had heard of it.
We used to have some of those here, and the old farts tourney when I first got started, old farts were 30.
I fought in a melee scenario at Lily's War called the 30 Years War, and it was everyone who was under 30 was on one side, and everyone who was over 30 was on the other, and sides were even, relatively even.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was the only knight on that side.
Oh wow, man.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Did they do that a couple times? Because I don't know if you were even you weren't
I
knighted the
remember
first time I
being
did a
one.
30 Years War thing.
It could have been just before, but
You
yeah.
probably were 13 the first time they did
They
that.
have done it a couple of times, but I do remember the Lilies where it was the 30 Years War Lilies. So I remember fighting.
Yeah, no, that's true. The old farts was. Sean has mentioned this a number of times, and he brought it up once this session already. Is one of the things that is helping that is 30 or 40 years ago, we as just people involved in a sport didn't understand how to take care of ourselves well enough to really succeed as we aged. And I think we have a much better understanding of that now through word of mouth with each other, as well as, heck, man, if you're curious about it and you're in your 40s or 50s and you're wanting to actually try to still do athletic things, there's an entire gigantic internet that will help you navigate through how to take care of yourself so that you can continue to do athletic endeavors as you get older. But I mean, I remember forever, and I'm sure Sean remembers this too. If you were a fighter and you were in your 40s, much less 50s,
Yeah.
you just beat on them
pushing
like they
retirement.
were a pail normally. I mean, they were a walking pail mostly. It was really hard to be good and to be old, for the longest time. And now we're very fortunate that we still can continue to be competitive into our 50s and 60s.
Yeah, and I know a lot of mine I was very fortunate to get taught, good body mechanics to begin with, and mechanics that are specifically designed to be kind to your body.
Mm-hmm.
And also as young as I was starting off with, I never had the body mass to rely on to just I can't just put more muscle behind it. So I mean, all of my power and all of my mechanics are physics or basic physics.
And so many people have been filtered out of the society by not having insurance, because getting an injury and not having insurance can be the end of your career.
You know what? I hadn't even thought about that. Canadian. But
well, it's a real thing.
Well, yeah,
I mean,
there was
it's
a
not
guy-
as prevalent now, but I think it was a big deal in the 70s and the 80s and the early 90s.
But did you guys hear about there was this guy who got injured at I don't know if it was at golf or something like that, but I don't know if it was bad body armor and he got a bunch of ribs broken here recently and he didn't have insurance and like that. I don't know what that's going to do to that guy. But yeah, that totally makes sense. Shucks, I was going to say something earlier and now I've forgotten it. I'll think of it and come back.
Sorry, you were gloating about being a Canadian, and
it's not the only thing I'm allowed to gloat about, right? So, health insurance, everything else.
it's a pretty cool thing. So gloat all you want.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let me ask you guys about the state of the current training environment. And again, I know you don't really have much to compare it to, but what's your what was your local practice or the support you had and like what was available to you to get you to be successful as young as you were. It still just irks me to have to say that as young as you were in your 30s. It's just weird, right? So Fedor, what was your training environment like?
So I have never been a member of like a real big barony or group like that with an active practice. what I really thrived on was I think I hit the sweet spot of a certain window of time where YouTube, SEA, YouTube stuff was really coming into prevalence. So I was able to pull, you know, Palomar videos and then Sean videos and then Arminius videos and, you know, Rifkin put up videos and started bringing people in from all over to teach independently. I spent a lot of time working on Appel, and I spent a lot of time watching whenever I could and trying to glean lessons from wherever I could and whoever I could as well.
Were you able to get to any of the winter workshops that Misty did?
I was not, no. So, yeah, my dad's really anti-fighting in general. So, you know.
But I know you were at Sport of Kings. I mean, you came to one of my classes at Sport of Kings.
So I was able to hitch a ride to Sport of Kings as a young page, and that was maybe one of 2 Sport of Kings I ever could make it to, ever. Wow. But it turned into a day of going from class to class to class. And you know how at the start of Sport of Kings, for those who have been, they always say, you know, don't feel bad about taking breaks, you know, retention rate. If you want to up how much you take out of each class, sometimes you have to plan for gaps. I was the young idiot who used neuroplasticity to the max and just went to every class I could on whatever topic I could and said, damn the rest. So, yeah.
Yep. All right, Roland, you talked about yours a little bit, but I want you to tell us a little bit more about your training environment.
So my first day in armor, they duct taped a breastplate to me, and Sir, I distinctly remember Sir Richard of Greyfall. He took me out into the field and he beat the snot out of me. Everything I tried to do, he stopped. He beat the crap out of me. But, and I tell people this in a good way, because he knew that by doing that, I was going to come back, because I was going to keep coming back until I was kicking his ass. I was not gonna leave it at that. So I came back the next week. I came back a couple weeks. He kept beating the snot out of me. Then he actually had to get surgery, so he was gone for a while. And when he left, the practice kind of died down. And for a while, it was just me in the park, and I would just run laps and like hit trees and stuff. And then I started bullying people on Facebook, like posting on Facebook, "I'm here, where you guys at?" And 2 people that actually I would say I wouldn't have been able to become a knight without these 2 guys coming out to practice was Steiner Olfsen and Cohen Wolf Drugerson. They both came out and they would just trade off and let me fight them over and over. And then I convinced them to start coming out on Tuesday nights too. So I was getting 2 nights with those guys, and it just the practice kind of started to pick up again. And then, you know, we started having 2 practices a night. Then I started going to Bart. And I had, when I would say probably about a year into fighting, me and 2 of the guys that live in my shire were actually really close friends. We all became squires to the same night. So we were squired by Sir Eric von Steinhaus. He's a Viscount. And actually, we were only squired to him for about a year before he unfortunately passed away. Yeah, so he passed away pretty quickly, and that kind of shook all of us. So we were kind of like, oh man, what do we do? SCA, and Duke Christopher actually stepped in and kind of fostered us, and he's kind of been guiding me ever since. And I will say that it was very lucky that I did find Duke Christopher, because we have a lot of the same mannerisms and a lot of the same ability. So a lot of times he doesn't have to explain to me how to do something. He just has to like download his battle computer and to say, hey, when he does this, you do that. So after that, you know, from there it started to skyrocket, and he's such a good coach. And one of the things that I tell people when they're coming up, like I have one of my friends that's I'm trying to help him get over the bar, and what I tell him about teaching is there are 2 types of athletes, and I learned this from my coach when I was in college. There's 2 types of athletes. There's the tough love athlete, the guy who responds to tough love, and there's the pat me on the back athlete, the guy who responds better to positive reinforcement. And you're either one or you're the other. You can maybe be kind of in between, but you're almost always one or the other. And Duke Christopher picked up really quickly that I'm a keep it real kind of guy. Like, I don't need you to tell me when I'm doing good. I need you to tell me when I'm fucking up, because if not, I'll just keep doing it. So he was a real big help. And like I said, I had lots of guys coming to our practice. The culture in West Kingdom is that usually the Knights will travel. Like they'll travel to practices to see candidates. And there was a time where a lot of them were coming to our practice. And that was kind of when I started to think, oh man, I gotta turn my game up, because there was a couple of us that were coming up in my shire, and I was like, oh, I don't want to get left behind, man. I don't want to get left behind. So, but yeah, I've always had great interactions with all of the peers before that. All of them, it felt like all of them wanted to see me succeed. I never got a big head because there was always somebody better right around the corner waiting to kick my ass. So, but yeah, I just I've always had a great time. I'm glad that I found the SCA. I'm glad that I finally caved and I started fighting. It's been a really good part of my life. Helped me get out of some dark times. So I'm always going to be appreciative of the SCA, man.
Likewise. Xerxes?
Yeah. So I did a little bit of offer before, and then Archie took over. But when I turned 16, I kind of inherited my sister's armor because she kind of stopped fighting, hopped in there. And really, I think I got right around the time I started, my parents actually stepped up as baronage of our barony that we were in. And we only had about maybe 8 fighters, and then add me in there in our barony. But we also, just 35 minutes north, was a canton off of our barony that we would travel to on Wednesdays. So I got practices on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And since my parents were baronage, we would travel most weekends. So I was getting about 3 fighting days out of the week, 2 practices, and then an event where I would just be able to go take over whatever tournament I could. So yeah, I mean, that happened for 2 years or so, and hit everything I possibly could. Did Gulf Wars both those years, and then went to college, which was literally in that canton. So at that point, some got a lot more folks were still into the habit of coming up to the Ames practice on Wednesdays. So a lot of times I would gather a lot more of those folks on my Wednesday practices, even while I'm at school. So I just had my Wednesdays. I'd get a bigger practice up there, and then we'd start recruiting some newer folks. But even at that point, I was kind of big fish, small pond, since it was mostly kids who just found it through college, and we were just getting started. Really, nobody seasoned. There was a couple of folks that were around, but other than my dad or folks coming up from the barony, making that trek, it really wasn't a great population in numbers. So
you had a bunch of your same age peer group that were all kind of
a little bit, but since they were just kind of new to the SCA, they didn't really have the expanse of knowledge or the groups. I was really me trying to facilitate something, and I felt so awkward about it because I felt like I was pressuring in a way. I was like, if you like it, you like it. You can hang around. I'm here. I'll teach you how to fight if you want. I was very hands off in that because I felt weird, and I was doing kind of. I almost consider my college experience like a Rumspringa. Like I was off. I played SCA a little bit when I wanted to, but I went to practice every week. That's what it was. And I just, joined a fraternity, had good mundane fun, learned how to golf finally, that kind of thing. So it's just one of those things. I'm like non-SCA, but at the same time, I'll go hit some things here and there. I'm still going to go to Lily's because I have the summer off, and I'm still going to go to some events that are around me, and this, that, and the other thing. Hit the big tournaments, go to Crown, But yeah, I mean, that's kind of. And then for the longest time, I had, before I even got into college, I had already hit my GOA. So the next logical step was a peerage, and I just thought, I don't have anything to worry about. I'll graduate college, and then probably shortly thereafter that I'll get knighted. So I was pretty excited or surprised when after my sophomore year, there I was. Getting knighted at 20. I was like, okay, this is not how this is supposed to work.
This is not my plan.
Right. But yeah.
All right, Corsac, what kind of training environment did you have? I know you said you kind of bounced around a little bit.
Well, yeah. So just at the beginning of my SCA career, like I moved a bunch of times, but I ended up here in a barony, and there were no knights here at the time. Kviger was still living in Norway, and it took him a year and a bit for him to move back. And Then once he got here, there was a night in Humboldt close by that I was squired to, and so he would come to practice every now and then. And then what ended up happening is just a bunch of us were like, well, where do we go to get better? And overwhelmingly, it was like, go down to Antir. So hey, I'm going to make a 24-hour one-way trip to Seattle.
So let me cut in. Did you start playing before or after the Kingdom split?
Oh, way before. I've been playing since 2010. And well,
so you guys,
5 years.
You guys still consider
way before 2010.
Well, hey, that's
I know it's relative.
Relative for me, it felt like ages, right? Like, I mean, it felt like a blink.
Well, it sounds like you were at that point in Avocal's history where on tier, like the I-5 corridor on tier, was another place.
It was totally like magic. You'd go down there. Hey, up here it's like really dry. And we have a higher elevation. So I'd go down there and I can breathe better than everybody else and I can fight longer than everybody else. It was the best thing for me. But yeah, would go down to like Seattle for Ursulmus or for a crown. Drove all the way to like Hood River, Oregon, from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Like, God, I'm pretty sure that's a 24-hour drive one way. And that sort of, we talked about this a lot actually as we were all like kind of getting better. We all had this like skin in the game about what we were doing because you had to have a lot of like effort put into that event to make it worth the crazy amount of hours you just drove.
Right.
So there was no like, I got hit really hard, I'm going to take all my stuff off. It's like, okay, you got hit really hard. Take a break. Go put your stuff back on and get back out there, man. You don't have time for this. You literally are like spending all of your summer just driving so you can get better. You had better start actively working at that. And there's a lot of events that I went to and you'd be the last guy on the field getting kicked off there. So that was kind of the culture I came from. Travel. So we travel all over the kingdom itself. And then once, I don't know, over the years, we just started having more nights in our baronies. So and then a ton of Pell. So because
I'm a big proponent.
Yeah.
So so one of the things that we're trying to do with the Coach's Corner that is something that I've been trying to do for for the training that I've done over the last 15 years or so, and I know Branos and Alan and a number of us, we're trying to get our sport past that old school mentality of the smash and bash training methodology, right? I know Roland was talking about this guy to just put him in armor and kick the snot out of him and like you just keep you coming back. But
well, I would like to say that he did that based on my personality. He doesn't do that with everybody, but that's part of being a good coach is knowing how to teach each person.
It was what you needed.
Yes, it was what I needed to come back.
Yeah.
So you were fucking around and you found out.
Yes, indeed. That is exactly what happened.
Well, and I think, it sounds like a lot of you guys, kind of coming up younger and recently, you never really had to deal with I'm just going to keep hitting this guy in the leg until he learns how to block this sort of training methodology. I know Fedor, at least in his time in Artemisia, he's experienced, a very different training methodology than what we had before. But for the longest time in our society, that was it. You just have to be faster or stronger or more athletic or whatever to be able to succeed. And I think we're teaching our sport better now than we were, even 15 years ago. And you guys are kind of all right in that sweet spot where it sounds like you guys have kind of been able to get better at our sport under a better training methodology. Would you agree, or do you think there's still some of that? I'm just going to hit this guy I'm going to hit this kid until he.
Nowadays, I don't do that. I don't like the just break them kind of thing. That was definitely my dad was the first to put me in armor. I think there was like 16 years of childhood that he was trying to take out in that moment. But no, I came away in tears because he kept hitting me in the hip. And he's like, I'm gonna keep hitting you there until you learn blocking. I'm like, maybe teach me how to block it first. You know, that's
Right.
an idea.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
I'm at the point where it's like, when I first get somebody who's in armor, I'm going to let them swing and have their fun.
Right.
I'm not going to just get hit. I'll leave some things open every now and then, give them the satisfaction of, yes, you threw the right thing. And then I'm going to throw something real fancy and cool at them. Just show them like the prettiness of the sport and like how cool it can be, but I'm not going to obliterate them. Like I'm going to hit helmet. I'm not blowing thighs. I'm not doing anything wild. I'll tack one from time to time, let them know it's there, but I'm not the kind of guy that's just going to come out and just, you know, just give you something nasty. I want you to have fun and just fight. Like I'm also the kind of guy that if it's your first time in armor, I'm not going to tell you what to do. Just come on, come have fun. This is what you came out for. I'm not going to give you a 13-page lecture on how to throw a shot. Just come try and hit me. Let's go. Have a good time. Okay.
You can hit somebody with a stick and not go to jail.
Yeah.
Right.
Do what you want. And then when you're ready and you're hooked, I'll show you how to throw a flat snap.
Right.
I hope we're mostly better because, I mean, when I was a young knight early, like first or second year, I ran one of my best friends out of the SCA because I was trying to get him to learn through pain how to block a leg / hip. And, you know, and I didn't realize why he actually had stopped coming around until years later. He told me, he's like, you're better now, but back early, I mean, I quit because of you. And I'm like, oh no. I mean, I was horrified to find that out. But it's what we thought we were supposed to do. It's how we learned in a lot of ways. And, you know, it is one of the reasons why I think Sean and I and a number of us are just so passionate now about the better ways to teach and to train and to open your mind and your hearts as a coach and try to find out what each individual student needs, you know, because almost no one needs to be painfully, you know, beaten to a new level. We did it because we didn't know any better, but it sucks. I'm still heartbroken thinking about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, I make no bones about the fact that
Fader, you're really quiet. I'm not sure if you know, Fader, you're really quiet. We can't hear you.
I think he's muting.
He might be muted. Yeah.
Oh man, he was chilling out to tunes, not even paying any attention to us.
Are you back now? No, that's
Still
not-
mute.
You're still muted.
No, he's not muted, guys. He's just really quiet. I can kind of hear him a little bit, but
Yeah, well.
Speak up, son.
I think Bud got the cord.
All right.
So,
All right.
who's teaching and training in your area? Xerxes? We'll work around the panel. I'm just kind of curious. And I'm always looking for name drops on people who are trying to do it right. And I know that you are doing what you can, so I'm really glad for that. But who else is working on trying to train and push prowess and to take our beloved combat activity into kind of a sport?
So I think it's kind of sectioned out, right? So there's not a ton of fighters, high-end fighters up in Iowa that are doing a lot, but there are some folks that are kind of bringing them in the smaller groups, people like Killian but you know, Simyaka and his group and up in Lincoln and Omaha, Nebraska. They're putting a pretty good practice on up there, and I've even driven up there, and V-Arm is up there. Down in Kansas City, this is kind of the center. So this is where like me and Aggie and Martis and Amatsu, and we've got a pretty good younger contingency that's coming in and really wanting to ramp it up a little
Bashir,
bit.
Lucian.
Yeah. Well, Lucian's out in St. Louis now. So that's when we section it off over into the St. Louis side of Missouri. We've got Lucian and Hirsch and those folks. In the middle there, you've got Donegal and Jeff City. And then if you get down to Springfield, you're looking at the Ashirs and folks. Ollie is now back down there. And yeah. And so
keep making Frambold come out because it's
Frambold,
good for him. It's good for you guys.
Yeah. So we'll get to see him fairly shortly. So that's good. But yeah, it kind of depends on where you're at. It's weird. But being linked in the middle, you get a lot of folks that kind of transfer from each place. You know, we get Hallgrim folks coming here to Kansas City to train, and then we go up to Omaha and train those folks up there. And then, sometimes we'll go down to Springfield. We've done that once or twice. Sometimes they've come up here. I've got like my squire and his brother coming from Manhattan just about every week. That's a 2.5 hour drive that they're making every week just for a practice on a Wednesday. So, I mean, they're getting elevated here next month or in a couple months. And I think that's a huge proponent of why, that amount of dedication to drive 2.5 hours just to get a good practice, it puts you out there. So, and it also makes you a better fighter, it turns out. So,
yeah, sometimes the drive is literal.
Yeah.
Corsac, what about Avakal? What pockets of training and who have you got working on things up there?
Well, everybody's kind of doing their own training in their own baronies quite a lot. I know that here, like I do some, but I've been in and out of practice. Sir Rogan does quite a bit, and Sir Kviger, Crown Prince Kviger, he does quite a lot. And then I know that Duke Vic has moved back to Edmonton in that area, so he's doing a lot up there. I believe him and Duke Albrecht. But then in Calgary, those are the kind of the three major areas that we have. Calgary has got like Sir Elias and Sir Kira that are doing quite a lot of that. Kira's really good at teaching a lot of people because her technique has to be perfect all the time. She's really, really intent on that. Like her technique is awesome. So she's really good at kind of correcting people when they're doing little mistakes and things.
Yeah, she's tiny like Bess.
Yeah, so you have to have all of your stuff working in the proper way if you're gonna create enough power. So
that's good though. I mean, a strong fundamentals and technique.
Oh yeah,
are something that every person can use regardless of how they're built and what they bring into it. But it's imperative if you're not the strongest, biggest, fastest. You've got to hone the fundamentals and make sure your technique is sharp.
Yeah.
Yeah, as what Xerxes was saying earlier. I mean, I had the same thing. I mean, I was like 5.5 feet tall and maybe 90 pounds.
Right.
Yeah, you have to have good mechanics. You don't have an option.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And hell, if I had been able to fight at 14 like you were able to, I would have been 109, right? It was just a wee lad.
Yeah.
Is there any other training you want to talk about, Corsac? Any groups?
I mean, no, not particularly. We tend to travel still a fair amount in between all the different groups. We don't really have a place that's like, this is the place you go to for as much training. There's a lot of nights in our Edmonton or Borealis area. And so we tend to do a lot of stuff there, but training all over.
And Sir Roland, I know that in the West Kingdom, there's lots and lots and lots, and it might be an exercise in futility to try to get you to name them all the little pockets, but the ones that are, really close to you, that you've seen and that you think highly of right now, where training is more than just a meet and beat. It's hey, let's work on things. Let's bring everyone's prowess up.
Well, we used to have before COVID, they called the Sunday Practice Roadshow, where they would move the practice to a different location in West Kingdom, and it was every other month or something like that. And we would all make that one Sunday to travel and get one really big practice in. But aside from that, I'd say probably the best one right now that I know of would be Bart Practice, Rockridge Bart. Because if you're lucky, Duke Radnor will show up, and it's always good to have him teach you some new stuff. Definitely
some old stuff.
Well, yeah, some old stuff that you haven't seen before or never thought about. That tends to work very effectively. Because he's not the biggest guy either, so he's got very, 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 very solid fundamentals. He's very, very hard to hit, and he does not miss shots that he should. He's very much if you're talking about like a boxer or like a martial artist, he's the guy who's not. I mean, I'm sure he probably has unparalleled athleticism, but he doesn't have to use it because he's so technically sound. And it's frustrating sometimes that you can't hit him, and it seems like he hits you so easily. But he's always a very good sport, and if he hits you with a certain shot a couple of times, he'll always stop and let you know what you're doing. That's tipping that to get it to here. Yeah, so he's very good about that. If it's 2 or 3 times that he hits you with the same shot, he'll stop and say, "Hey, this is why this is happening. When this happens, you need to do that." But yeah, I would say Bart is the biggest concentration of knights, I would say. Right now, that or the Santa Clara practice, because you can get like Duke Fabian, who is recently come back out, and Duke Mark frequents that practice too. It's always good to get time with Duke Mark. So, but I would say those two are probably the two biggest, and I would say Rockridge is probably Central Mists, and the other one is probably Central Sinagua. So you do, depending on where you're in, which principality you're in, you do get a very good size practice that you can travel to within, I think for me, it's like 45 minutes to an hour to get to Bart. So it's not a super big, it's not a super big commitment. I mean, it's a Thursday night, and I gotta be up at 6 a.m. the next day, but it doesn't hurt. It's
You can correct me if I'm wrong.
He's
You can
gonna-
correct me if I'm wrong, but I just want to let the viewers know kind of what BART is. That's the Oakland practice, the Bay
Yes.
Area Rapid Transit. It's under the bridges.
under
it's
a Rockridge BART station. Yeah.
It's really cool. I took a pilgrimage there several years back to make sure I added that, and it's also the
It's Mecca.
longest same place
Yes.
fighter practice, oldest same place fighter practice in SCA. So
Yeah. The longest running practice.
Yeah. It's good. It's really good.
So
and it's
Yeah, it's only-
historically cool as hell.
yeah, it's a great spot. It's right next to a bunch of restaurants and grocery stores too, and there's a little bar by there. I'm sure Thursday nights is where they make most of their money.
It's not very far from the house where the SCA was first at.
Oh, wow.
Oh, I actually didn't know that. Interesting.
I took my Mecca for that too. So
So yeah, you guys will make fun of it that it's only an hour for me, but I have heard the horror stories. Like Thorfinn always talks about driving 3 hours to go to a practice. So
I mean,
I know that
24 for an event. Like,
yeah.
And
I know
made
that I'm
trip
blessed.
3 to 4 times a year.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. I know that I'm blessed. My local practice is like 5 minutes from my house. So I'm definitely blessed.
Yeah.
poor Corsac. I remember when I was on the board of directors when the petitions were coming through for your kingdom, and I remember going, God, we do not need another damned kingdom. We just make them all holy crap, they have to drive 13 hours just so that they can then take the only way across these mountains to then go the other 5 hours to get to, oh no, you poor, horrible people. This is terrible. Yeah, sure. If they got enough of everything else, I'm good. I'll sign.
Yeah. Totally.
I'll raise my hand. Yep. That's terrible.
It wasn't like, I don't know. You talk about like people who just kind of, you did what you had to do and that you put in the work. I think a lot of people got a lot out of it just because of those drives, because you build a lot of really important friendships when you're sitting in a vehicle for that many hours.
Yeah.
A lot of people that I've stuck around in the SCA to be with, those friendships were made there, right? So not all bad.
Yeah.
And then Fedor, is there anyone at all doing any teaching or training in Artemisia?
Just say
Bunch of
yay.
hats. And we still can't hear him.
I still can't hear him. Shucks. Shucks, man.
Yeah, well, I think we know what he's saying.
Yeah, no.
Very
No, there's no
fortunate.
money.
I think Artemisia is to have not just Sean, but a number of people who are really trying to push prowess. So
We're blessed. Sagan moved out here mid '90s and brought a lot of what he had learned with Radnor and Paul as far as training methodology. I mean, that was the first time that I'd really been exposed to the idea of training versus fighting. And and that training methodology, that process, has really taken hold in our kingdom. And not just myself. I mean, one of the things I like about having people say, "Hey, can I come to your house and do some training?" Like, yeah, you certainly can, and you can get some training with me. And while you're at it, Floki and Greg and Timmer and Lachlan, and we have so many people here that I get to train with on a regular basis. That being able to have people come to see me to get some work with me, being able to share them, share that with all these other people that we have who are just phenomenal trainers. We definitely, especially here in our barony, we have a definitely a training oriented practice rather than a sparring oriented practice. Very much like the Twin Moons practice that you're at there, Al-Anon. That's much more training oriented. We've had this discussion about, some of the other practices you have down there in the Central Valley, are more sparring oriented, but that Twin Moons practice is more training oriented. So we're very fortunate.
But also, it can flick pretty quickly and go into competitive. Hey, let's see where you are.
Yeah. Yeah,
and all practices should do that. That it shouldn't be the sole purpose of practice anymore, and because that is a kind of a practice rather than a training. But
right,
you do need to test yourself occasionally.
Yeah, well, at some point you need to do sparring, right? You need to do sparring outside of a tournament environment as well. Because if the only chance you have to exercise your full skill set is in tournament, that brings with it a totally different package, totally different set of problems. So. All right. Well, we are a bit over time here, so I'm just gonna. I would start with Fedor. We're going around the horn here with some last thoughts there, but is your mic working now?
Is it?
Nah, turns out not so much. All right, Roland.
I think he's saying he wants to thank me personally for something. That's really cool. Man, thanks.
Checks in the mail.
Checks in the mail.
All right, Roland, you got any final thoughts for us?
I would say drive. At the end of the day, it's drive. It's how much you get out of it, what you put into it. And I am a firm believer of that you always get out of it what you put into it. And I do want to touch on one thing that one of my Squire brothers said was annoying to him is when knights say, keep doing what you're doing. What does that mean? And I'm gonna clarify that right now. What that means is you are doing the right thing and you are learning. Keep learning and keep soaking it in because you are on the right path. It doesn't. A lot of people hear that and they think, well, if I'm doing what's right, then why am I? It's because you're on the right path, and that's where we want you to be. That's exactly where we want you to be, and keep doing exactly what it is that you're doing.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you're there, but you're getting there.
Yeah,
yes, yes.
You still got to do the thing.
Exactly. That and drive, and you will succeed. And one of the reasons why I love the SCA is it is the only sport that I've ever been in where not just the people on your team, but the people you are fighting want to see you succeed.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've been on some dirty teams in my life where people who are on your team, they want to see you lose and get undercut so they get playing time. But in the SCA, everybody wants to see you succeed. And and that's why I love this community, and that's why I love this game. And I'll talk to anybody. If you see me in an event, I've usually always got a smile on my face, and I'll talk to anybody about anything, man. I love being there, and it's like my vacation. Whenever I get to go to an event, I get to spend time away from the real world, and you can't put a price on that for me. So
that's awesome.
Wow, thanks, Xerxes.
Yeah, I'm going to say something controversial.
Whoa!
Time is more.
That's why we hired you.
Time.
Say that again.
Helmet time is more important than Pell time. But
shots fired.
But you cannot go to a practice every day. So fill in those blank spaces with Pell. But yeah, the more you fight, the better you're going to get. The more you see, the better you're going to get. So do the pickups. Fight people you've never met before in your life. Be humbled by those guys with a red belt. Go out there, get your ass beat, and learn from it. And just have fun. If you're having fun, you're doing the right thing. So, yeah.
Love it.
I got here's the thing that everybody at my practice knows me for this. People kind of quit before they're done. And they quit before they're done a lot. They just get a little tired and their arm hurts. They're not used to holding the shield. If you're a new fighter and you're like, I feel like I'm done for the day. Take 5 minutes. Take your helmet off, grab some water. Don't take your shit off. Wait 5 minutes, put your helmet back on, go fight one more fight. Just go fight one more. Like one more is not a big deal. You can go fight one more fight. You can go stand there and get hit in the head if you need to. But it's 10, 15 seconds, an hour, however long you want to do that for. Farther and a longer in your helmet time that you need. Like Xerxes says, like, helmet time is more important. Well, get as much helmet time as you can. You go to events someplace, you don't want to be out after you get hit one time. Take your time to rest for 5 minutes, put your stuff back on, get back out there. And you're going to have way more success than just, well, I go to events all the time and I don't seem to get any better. Well, it's because you need to get everything you can possibly get out of it. So
Awesome.
Cool. Well, I'd like to thank you guys again for joining us. I think Ronald's comment really kind of summed everything up, and as to the importance of this. We are in a different society now where 30 years old is no longer the old farts tourney. And it's a changing world. And I definitely appreciate having you guys on to share your experiences coming up. Let
me talk about the YouTube site and next week.
Yeah.
So, if you go to YouTube and type in SCA Coaches Corner, remember it's plural, not possessive. And that's actually kind of there's a lesson in there somewhere too, but it's SCA Coaches Corner. And then you can get all of our, almost all of ours. And we're trying to be very consistent about all of our archived episodes. So please check that out. If you haven't, if there's episodes you'd like to check out in the past, we have hours upon hours of hopefully decent content. And then next week, I want to let you know that the episode is going to be Going Beyond the Trainer. How do you get better when you are the best fighter at your practice? And we've got our some really good coaches prepared to try to help you with that. And, I know I have some personal experience with that as well. So it is definitely doable, but you're going to have to work at it. It actually requires more work than more work. That's pretty much everything, right? Requires more work.
Yeah.
True story.
Thanks, Sean.
Right on. And also, I'd like to put a reminder out there too. As Ellen said, we've been doing this for 2.5 years now, and we've covered a lot of subjects. But if there's something that you want to hear the coaches talk about, feel free to put that up on the Coaches Corner discussion page, or hit us up on the SCA Coaches Corner Facebook page as well. If there's something you want to hear us talk about, we love talking about fighting, and we have access to a lot of resources, these fine gentlemen included, to kind of help us talk about these things and to help you become better coaches and better fighters. So go ahead and let us know what you want to hear. So my thanks to Alan as always for his production work and joining us in the conversation there. Always love having you on, man.
Thanks.
All right, everybody have a good night. Thanks again to our panel, and we will see you guys next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Later.